from the heart of the city too busy to hate. A progressive voice making too much sense for corporate media's comfort. This is The Ron Show, where we the people come first. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hi, thank you for listening. Weekdays, 8 a.m., 4 p.m. on Georgia Now, 11 p.m. Progressive Voice via TuneIn wherever you podcast. You're going to get an abridged version of the show today. I actually have taken much of this week off, sort of needing it. After the General Assembly session each year, I just sort of like to give myself a little bit of a breather after weeks and weeks and weeks of following legislation and whether it passed, whether it didn't, the machinations of it. It gets to be kind of exhausting. And understand, like doing this show, following all those stories, this is not even like my full-time job. I mean, I make a little extra on the side for this occasionally. And by the way, support the show, ronshowatl.com if you'd like to, buy a host a cup of coffee, a lunch or something like that. Oh, that would be so huge. So anyway, yeah, I did take much of this week off. I even told my good friend Sterling Thrill, who joins me most Fridays, has for the last few months for Friday Funnies. I'm like, I'm not going to do a show this week. So, little break for all of us. And so he won't be joining the show, unfortunately, because I preemptively gave him the day off. Sorry. Nonetheless, I thought I would dive into some op-eds that I have. Oh my God, so many tabs. I must have 24 tabs open on the computer here from stories that I was like, I'll get to this. I like to set some of these aside for when I have slow days and want to jump in on something that's a little evergreen. And this isn't really evergreen, but I do want to get into the curious, do we call it ascendancy? I don't know yet. There's no polling that shows that there is a reason to label this an ascendancy until otherwise noted, but there is a guy by the name of Rahm Emanuel who is making the rounds. And a lot of folks are talking about him being a potential 2028 dark horse. That's right, Rahm Emanuel. I don't know that that's necessarily, but if you're Rahm Emanuel, or you're, for example, Congressman Ro Khanna, who I believe represents the wealthiest congressional district in the country, Silicon Valley, California, if you are Ro Khanna or you're Rahm Emanuel, and you are not a marquee Democratic name, then you've got to do the work to make yourself a marquee Democratic name as early as possible. Let me first go to an op-ed written by conservative columnist Ingrid Jacques for the USA Today. The headline caught my attention, and Rahm Emanuel factors into this, so bear with me here. Democrats lost the plot, she says. Now they're losing voters. Progressive states like New York and California keep losing residents to lower tax, higher freedom states. I love terms like freedom being used by conservatives. Higher freedom states like Texas and Florida. I mean, I guess you're more free in states like Texas and Florida unless you're a reproductive age woman or an Hispanic person who believed you were on a pathway to citizenship, or you're an LGBTQI plus individual. Maybe you want to marry and adopt a kid. Maybe you're trans and you just want the treatment that you believe in your heart of heart that your doctor has prescribed you. Yeah, plenty of freedom in those states, I guess, unless ... But you don't count because you're a leftist. Clearly. So Ingrid Jacques writes, Rahm Emanuel was recently asked this question in an interview with G0 World. If you look ahead to 2028 for a second, if you're the Democrats, what's the most likely way they blow it? Being Democrats, was Emanuel's reply. Ingrid Jacques continues, the former chief of staff to President Barack Obama, former mayor of Chicago, and ambassador to Japan under President Joe Biden, Emanuel has been a big player in Democratic politics for a long time. His fellow Democrats would be smart to listen to what he's saying now. Well, here is what he's saying now.
We lost the plot. We as Democrats nationally, from Latinx to defunding the police to police organizations are all racist to bringing a set of cultural wars to our schools. Any parent, they not all, but close to 99% of the parents will send their child to a school because they will get a good education. And we brought a set of cultural wars to the schools. We are on the losing side of those cultural wars. Full stop. I jokingly say, and I believe, We weren't really good in the kitchen table. We weren't really good in the family room. The only room in the house we were good at was the bathroom, and it's the smallest room in the house. But we lost the plot.
Why?
And because the party got unanchored. Now go back to two successful presidents, President Obama, President Clinton. President Obama runs, and at a point, his own pastor, Father Wright, says some very ugly things, and he gives a very powerful speech, not only distancing himself, but saying what's morally correct and incorrect. And he also does a tone correctly about a series of things. There's no red America or blue America. There's one America. He talks about it's easier to father a child, but it's hard to be its dad. President Clinton, in his, now has been shorthanded Sister Souljah, but is very honest about an artist who's talking about in the aftershocks of Rodney King about killing police officers, killing white people as retribution, and goes to Operation Push and condemns it. If you really want to go farther back, President Kennedy, when he's running for president, goes to a Baptist group in Texas and says, I will not be a Catholic president that takes direction from the Pope. I'll be an American president who is Catholic. Every one of our most successful electoral presidents anchor themselves in what I call middle-class values and values that people are universal, at least in this country, ascribe to. And each of them had different measures on that. Why the party in the last, pick your window, 5 to 8 years, I don't care, loses sight of both where the center of gravity is and where universal values are. I'll just take one on that I shouldn't. So here goes. I remember fighting for, and again, growing up in Marcia Emanuel, small business home, Title IX. The reason we are champions in women's sports in the Olympics and soccer, hockey, etc., is Title IX. Why would you undercut the premise of Title IX with the ability of trans men playing in women's sports? To me, it's insane.
Baffling.
You're undermining one of the great accomplishments we as a country, but also spearheaded by the Democratic Party, Title IX. And we're undercutting it.
No. No, we're not. No, we're not. Democrats didn't champion trans participation in sports. Sports did that at various levels. At the scholastic, at the intercollegiate, at the international. Democrats didn't do that. Nobody enacted a law. Nobody enacted a policy that provided for trans participation in sports. Sports did that. Democrats just didn't find the zest or the zeal in bullying it. That's Republicans. What Democrats did was say nothing. Because again, it's not a governmental issue. It's a political issue. There's a difference, but not a governmental issue. And so while Democrats may have, for far too long, as far as I'm concerned, and again, I'm in the alphabet mafia myself. I'm part of the G's and the LGBTQI+. We sat there as nobody from the left said anything. Could you make the, how do I say this? Not the argument, but could you take the position that this is a conversation that needs to be had with folks on the left, folks on the right, folks in the middle, vested, interested parties, doctors, physicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, genders. Could we have had a conversation about? Yeah, absolutely. I totally get that. I have friends who are fathers of daughters who have concerns themselves about their little girl playing lacrosse with another athlete who happens to be a trans female on the field, and a physical interaction could happen. I totally get it. But you know what? I don't want this man leading my party if he's going to, in 2026, 2 years before the 2028 election that he apparently seems to be priming himself for, if he's going to say that Democrats did anything on this issue, as if they should accept some blame for a wedge social issue being used for the GOP's gain, because Democrats didn't do a damn thing on this issue. They shouldn't take any credit or blame for there being trans participation in sports, because again, they didn't introduce jack shit but they also didn't defend or deny or even posit that there should be a conversation, which is what they should have done.
And so to me, the party and
how many Democrats are
voices,
going to raise their hand for that, though, for what you just said on a debate stage in 2028?
I can tell you one person. That's all I can tell. Everybody will have their own conscience and their own answer.
I think the weird thing is, though,
but again,
Gavin Newsom's back.
But let me say this.
Yeah.
What happened is, and this is me, the beauty of being 8,000 miles away, you can see things with a little more clarity sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Or get drunk upstairs on the
the $5,000 bottle of wine helps.
That sounds like the good part, honestly.
But look, the thing I would say is the country has a culture of acceptance.
I don't know that we do.
We went from acceptance to advocacy. Big difference.
And telling you what you should think about something.
No,
and I think
they didn't.
I was a mayor. 2016, I signed an ordinance as related to bathroom access. I never lost focus on my graduation rates, which went up all 8 years of my tenure. Went from 56 to 83. Never took my eye off the ball. Did it, signed it, said we're going to be inclusive. That's it. When I was ambassador, trans people worked there. One of the largest embassies staffs in the country, in the world rather. Built a culture of inclusion, but we're here to serve one interest, the American people and the American interest. That is what our job is. We're not going to do any other advocacy.
All right.
That's it. And it was fine. It was a culture of acceptance.
Didn't have the flag up in the embassy? No, because there were, right? The right-wingers got really upset about
Look, I mean, I pushed when Japan was debating non-discrimination, which is true to their constitution. 5 of the 6 courts that heard it agreed. And I got other ambassadors to advocate for non-discrimination law. But that said, I believe in a culture and led this effort both as mayor and as ambassador, a culture of acceptance. It was when we became advocates that I think the party lost the plot.
Again, I disagree with the premise altogether, but let me clear up before I go any further. The audio you heard from Rahm Emanuel was from him sitting in the Fifth Column podcast. I had mentioned that he was at the G0 conference, and I do have audio of that, but I wanted you to be sure that you understood that the audio that I played from Rahm Emanuel discussing Democrats losing the plot came from the Fifth Column podcast hosted by Kamel Foster, Michael Moynihan, and Matt Welch, the other voices you hear in that conversation, where Rahm Emanuel opines that Democrats lost the plot, that they got drawn into a conversation about trans participation in sports, something I wholeheartedly disagree with. He talked about his bona fides as Chicago mayor and as ambassador to the United States, his having trans people on the staff and protecting trans access to bathrooms. There are those that are going to tell you that even doing that would be to have lost the plot. I mean, I wholeheartedly disagree. I go into businesses all the time that only have one bathroom, and we somehow figure it out. Men, women, they, them, we all figure it out. But I'm always going to push back on the notion that Democrats somehow pursued trans participation in sports. No, they didn't. Sports did that. Anyway, back to the op-ed that I led this conversation with from Ingrid Jock. She writes that in that same interview, which I'll give you audio to in a little bit, Emanuel also mused, we need to get on the business of talking about a future we need to build that matters to everybody. You know what? Let me just give you the audio from this clip. I'm sorry, I keep alluding to the clip, or actually she does in her op-ed. So here is that audio.
If you look ahead to 2028 for a second, if you're the Democrats, what's the most likely way they blow it? Being Democrats. Look, there's a lot of people, let me use this as an anecdote, as a joke. But to make, not a joke, but to make a point, there's a group among Democrats, don't fill out all these questionnaires.
Yeah, Third Way says that.
Well, the questionnaire is not the problem. It's your answers that are the problem. I've said this before. I mean, I'm one of the things, being ambassador, 8,000 miles away, 12 hours away, I was watching, I learned more about America being away. I was like, what is going on, especially for the Democratic Party? We spent 2 years communicating to people that we were worried about bathroom access and locker room access, and we never focused on classroom excellence.
But he, in the Fifth Column podcast, bragged about his participation as Chicago mayor in fighting the good fight when it comes to bathroom access. Rahm.
50% of our kids today cannot read at grade level, and not a word. 50%. What makes you think fourth grade is going to get easier after third grade? You can't read, and you know more about the president's position on windmills. Never commented on it. No governor said we needed an emergency meeting to discuss this and figure out. And in Mississippi, where I went, they have an answer. And the party needs to remember, like, not what any one individual interest group is. What is the interest of the American people and the ability to communicate not only their anxieties, but their hopes and their dreams? The one thing I'm optimistic about 2028. And I mean, look, we have had two presidents that have talked about restoring a past that's not coming back. We need to get on the business of talking about a future we need to build that matters to everybody. And that is the most important thing Democrats do. If they get caught in the cultural cul-de-sac again, running around, getting themselves wrapped around an ankle, the American people will make a judgment. So what you got to do is not fall into the traps. You have three examples from Kennedy, Clinton, and Obama of how to win. Don't try to rewrite a new playbook. It existed and it's worked from the three most successful presidents we've had.
It's not so much that he's wrong about Democrats getting caught in a cul-de-sac. It's the fact that he believes that they drove into the cul-de-sac, and I wholeheartedly disagree. Republicans just catch them in that cul-de-sac and trap them into a position that they just happen to wander into unbeknownst to them. Trans participation in sports was not a Democrat-led issue. Find me a Democratic politician who put that on their platform. We've got a trans woman running for a state house seat here in Georgia against, she's in the primary. Her name is, Erin Baker. And she's running against Representative Esther Panich in the Democratic primary. And by the way, it's a nasty, heated little primary back and forth right now. I go back and forth in my, do I like Esther? Like, to me, I get it. She's a Jewish American. Her allegiance to Israel, to me anyway, sometimes trumps her allegiance to the American voter, to the Georgia voter, to her constituents. But that's, neither here nor there. I don't happen to think that her opponent, Erin Baker, has an allegiance to trans people greater than people. And that's how it should be, right? But Rahm Emanuel's assertion that Democrats somehow champion trans causes at their peril, to me, is no. But let's also remember, he was the Obama chief of staff who, let's go back in time to when Obama was president. When Obama was sworn in 2009, gay marriage was not legal. It wouldn't be legal by the beginning of his second term. It just happened. It happened not because of President Barack Obama, and it happened not because of the Democratic Party. I would argue it actually happened in spite of the Democratic Party. It happened because society said, y'all, this is ridiculous. And through legal means, the Obergefell decision happened in the Supreme Court. Now, that's a different Supreme Court than we have now because of the withholding of Obama's pick and the withholding of, I would say the outright taking of Biden's pick. If you were going to use the same logic to withhold from Obama, you didn't withhold from Trump. That's a Mitch McConnell problem, right? But gay marriage didn't happen because of Democrats or because of Rahm Emanuel or because of Barack Obama. You could make the argument that it may have happened because, in some respects, Joe Biden sort of outed Barack Obama in his support for gay marriage. But that's kind of part of the problem with the Democratic Party, if you ask me. And I'm not sitting here saying that they should have championed trans participation in sports. Again, a conversation that can be had. I have lots of trans friends who participate in sports, by the way, as adults in the same softball league I do. Many of whom are way better at it than I am. But it's a conversation to be had at the scholastic level, for sure. Absolutely. But what I am saying is one of the reasons I think Democrats also fail is because they whimper and whine and hide in the corner and don't say a thing when they need to stand up for Americans, all Americans, even the marginalized Americans that are picked on and bullied for no damn good reason. I opine that is why Kamala Harris suffered so greatly towards the end of her presidential campaign because of the whole trans-surgical prison procedures. All she had to say was, the Constitution protects all Americans. Period. End of story. You want proof? It still happens right now while Donald Trump is president because he can't do anything about it either.
This is The Ron Show.
Heard weekdays, 8 a.m., 4 p.m. on Georgia Now, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn. I'm going to take you back to Ingrid Jock's op-ed. I know it's painful because she's a conservative columnist, but she's focused on Rahm Emanuel, who has decided, I guess, it seems as if he's entering the fray in the 2028 conversation. And when you're Rahm Emanuel, I think you have to, because you're not Kamala Harris. You're not Pete Buttigieg. You're not Gavin Newsom. You're not a household name in current Democratic political circles. You have cachet because you were in the Obama administration. You were an ambassador in the Biden administration. So in Ingrid Jock's piece, she, again, a conservative columnist, it's in her best interest, it's in conservatives' best interest to focus more on an issue that Democrats did not champion: trans participation in sports. Did Democrats defend trans access to bathrooms? Absolutely. Everyone should have access to bathrooms. There are, however, continuing efforts and laws that deny that access in public places and spaces. It's bonkers. I believe we've got a new bill in Idaho that is essentially veto-proof. A newly passed law in Kansas, as a matter of fact, was tested by a transgender woman. Samantha Boucher. Is it Boucher? Boucher? God, I don't know. You just never know. I don't see the accent, so I'm going to go Samantha Boucher. Let me read this to you. Transgender activist, I'll put this in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Transgender activist Samantha Boucher deliberately violated a newly enacted Kansas law criminalizing the use of bathrooms or other facilities that do not align with a person's sex assigned at birth. The founder and executive director of the national nonprofit Trans Liberty, Boucher opposes the law, which took effect after Republican lawmakers overrode a veto by Democratic Governor Laura Kelly. Good for Governor Kelly. This is not trans participation in sports. This is people being allowed to use the freaking bathroom. This is not something that Governor Kelly is going to put on her campaign literature or anything like that. She just quietly went about it the right way, protecting people's access to a bathroom. Boucher told the Kansas Reflector she came to Kansas on March 31st, Trans Day of Visibility, because, quote, no single bill in American history has ever been as aggressive toward the trans community as SB 244, referring to the law by its legislative designation. The law not only restricts bathroom use for transgender people, but also requires all state IDs to carry a gender marker reflecting a person's sex assigned at birth. Since its passage, Kansas has retroactively invalidated, that's right, you remember this story? The driver's licenses of anyone whose gender marker does not comply. Individuals found with an invalid license or other identity document can be prosecuted and face penalties. This is, dare I say, it's Nazi era-ish. In response, Trans Liberty has advised transgender Kansans to leave the state and launched Operation Lifeboat, an initiative providing cash assistance to help residents relocate to states with more supportive policies. And let me put a pin in that, because that is sort of the basis of the op-ed I started this show with from Ingrid. Her name's Ingrid, right? I forgot her last name. Ingrid Jock. That it's because Democrats have lost the plot, y'all, that people are fleeing by the tens of thousands or millions from progressive states to more freedom-loving states like Texas and Florida, which I guess consider Kansas to be a free state, a state with more liberty and independence and more freedom. I mean, I guess unless you're a trans person, right? In which case, your driver's license is invalid and you can't drive anymore. And, you know, back to the Kansas story. Boucher has argued there is confusion over how the law will be enforced and has sought to test its limits, noting that it allows people who object to transgender individuals in opposite-sex bathrooms to sue those they believe are in violation. Under the law, a first violation results in a warning. A second carries a $1,000 civil penalty for using the bathroom. And subsequent offenses can be prosecuted as misdemeanors punishable by up to 6 months in jail. Where, by the way, if you're in jail and you need surgery or medical care, this is asinine. However, it remains unclear whether enforcement requires a formal complaint. Boucher encountered Governor Kelly in the Kansas State Capitol rotunda, thanked her for vetoing the legislation, and said she intended to violate the law to test how the so-called bathroom ban would be enforced. I'm very sorry that you and others have been put in this situation, Governor Kelly told her. And now we will see if the Attorney General chooses to enforce the law, Boucher replied. Upon entering the Capitol, Boucher told Capitol Police that she intended to use the bathroom in violation of the law. Police told her they're not responsible for enforcing the civil provisions and would notify the Kansas Department of Administration, which oversees the Capitol building. At Boucher's request, Kansas Highway Patrol Lieutenant Grady Walker followed her to the bathroom, filmed her entering and exiting 3 times, using it on the first occasion, and questioned her privately afterward. Walker later told reporters he was treating the violation as a criminal investigation, saying, "We will not be able to discuss or disclose any information about this investigation until it's concluded, but she is free to leave at this time." We didn't get to find out. Number one, number two. Samir Arif, a spokesperson for the Kansas Department of Administration, told the Reflector that as of 4 p.m. on March 31st, the agency had not received any complaints about Boucher's use of the restroom. He declined to answer follow-up questions about how the law is enforced, who must file a complaint to trigger enforcement, or whether there is a deadline to do so. Is there a statute of limitations on peeing or pooping? Under the law, the Attorney General office is responsible for prosecuting violations, but must first give government entities notice and an opportunity to remedy any alleged violations before they can be fined for failing to enforce the bathroom restrictions. The law is currently being challenged in court. A judge previously denied an emergency request from the American Civil Liberties Union to block enforcement, and the ACLU is continuing to seek an injunction. The court is not scheduled to hear arguments until September 29th. This was this year? Or that's coming. That's still yet to be. Boucher told Topeka-based NBC affiliate KSNT she hopes to shine a light on flaws in the law and prevent other states from adopting similar measures. This is unprecedented, and it cannot be allowed to stand because the domino effect that it's going to have across the country is going to be profound. Oh, for sure. Oh, no, 1,000%. She's absolutely right, because if there's one thing Republicans love, it's copycatting bigotry. If they see they can do it in one state, oh boy, they breathlessly try in another. They all line up on the tarmac. Texas, oh, I bet Texas is just chomping at the bit. Oh, man, can we get that state legislature back in here real quick? Oh, man, we got to pass that. Louisiana, Florida, oh, man, they just got to be wiping their hands going, oh, get in here so we can do this. Again, remember, Ingrid Jock has this opinion now that people are fleeing progressive states. They're not fleeing red states. We don't have people fleeing red states. Except for, I have a lot of friends who have left the state because of the 6-week abortion ban or the lack of trans medical care for people under the age of 18, for young people in this state. Of course, the decimation of the film and TV industry that I guess we can't just tax break our way into relevance again. So back to Ingrid Jock's op-ed. She writes, in another interview, Emanuel said the party had lost the plot, especially on culture issues. That's the first interview I gave you the audio from as the show started. So she says, can Democrats do it again? The midterm elections are just 7 months away, after all, and the signs aren't looking great for Democrats when compared with previous midterms under our Republican president. What is she talking about? Democrats are overperforming. In 2025 and 2026, we're overperforming. We're flipping state house and congressional districts. We're now within 12 points of winning Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. that was like a 30, was it 36? It was a double digit, twice as large, if not larger, margin. And Ingrid Jacques would have you believe it's because she looks at folks fleeing New York or California as for reasons why. Now, I will give you this. If you want to look ahead to 2030 and the census and reallocation, okay, there's something to be said there. There's some meat on the bone, and I'm happy to dive into that. So while people are fleeing states like Georgia and Kansas and Texas and Louisiana and all these other right-wing states, Idaho, where you can't even live in your true nature, you cannot be a woman who needs to seek medical care, you cannot be a trans individual, you cannot be the parent of a trans child without having your rights violated. It's Ingrid Jacques who believes because people are leaving states like New York and California, those states that are heavily populated. Well, New York's heavily populated in and around New York. The rest of New York is very sparse outside of like Buffalo, Albany, I guess. People are fleeing those states, though, and because of, well, you know, Republicans, they love gerrymandering. Because of the scepter of gerrymandering and the 2030 census, not that Trump waited, the 2030 census and Republican-controlled legislatures and governor's offices, there is the potential, of course, for Republicans gaining more seats. That is Ingrid Jacques' opinion here. Not that Democrats are not doing well right now. She's taking her eye off the ball, not at all looking at current trend lines that, irrespective of where Americans are moving to or live, they're growing sour on the GOP brand. She writes, while much focus is on how Americans plan to vote in upcoming elections, I wouldn't lose focus on that, Ingrid. Where they will be voting from has gotten my attention of late, she writes. Progressive states like New York and California keep losing residents to lower tax, higher freedom states like Texas and Florida. Higher freedom. Higher freedom, again, unless you're a woman, LGBTQI+, if you're a same-sex couple and you want to adopt a child, you're a trans person, parents of trans kids, yeah, higher freedom unless. Governors of the blue states are starting to notice. In March, New York Governor Kathy Hochul made some headlines when she asked patriotic millionaires to cut me the checks. Hochul was chiding the exodus of wealthy taxpayers from her state to ones like Florida. She said they need to stay in New York to support, quote, the generous social programs that we want to have in our state. Sadly for her, Ingrid Jacques writes, that's probably why they left, or at least a big part of it. She only focuses on 2 states, though. Here's the problem. The states with the largest population growth, the 10-year population change, according to the World Population Review, states like Utah and Idaho rank ahead of Texas and Florida. Florida's like, wait, you know, all right. Utah is a decidedly conservative state. It's also a decidedly conservative state that tends to have politicians that don't bootlick for Donald Trump. Idaho has gained population in large part from California, but it's also, I mean, it's still a red state, but it's becoming a little more purple. And then you come to the list here. You've got Texas. Texas is in play. Texas is a swing state again. Up. Colorado. Colorado is 6th. District of Columbia, which isn't a state, clearly. Washington State, 8th when it comes to population growth. Washington State is a blue state, right? You have Arizona. Arizona's a swing state. You have Oregon, blue state. Georgia, in play. These are states that are growing in population. Delaware, Montana, North Carolina, a swing state. I mean, that's why it's important, by the way, for folks to vote in elections and pay attention to what's happening at the state level, because in states like North Carolina and Colorado, which you would opine, right, that they too stand to gain seats in Congress. North Carolina is badly gerrymandered, however. Texas, badly gerrymandered. But if Texas is Georgia, we talk all the time about running for state office in Georgia. Well, who do you think is going to try and draw the maps? That's right. It's important to vote in those state elections so that Ingrid Jock has to write a correction in 2031, right? Oh, well, we didn't see that coming. Or here's an idea. Democrats retake the House and the Senate and a lame duck Donald Trump in the White House, and they come to an agreement. This gerrymandering thing is really bad. You agree it's bad, right? It's terrible, right? It's terrible in Indiana. I'm sorry, in Illinois. It's terrible in New York. It's terrible in Virginia. It's terrible in California. We should outlaw gerrymandering, right, President Trump? Okay, hold him to the fire. Back to Ingrid Jock. It's also kind of humorous since just a few years ago in 2022, Kathy Hochul, governor of New York, told Republicans in her state to take a hike, literally to, quote, jump on a bus and, quote, get out of town because they, quote, don't represent our values. I mean, that's a mischaracterization, but I won't go down that rabbit hole because this is a show on Georgia now, not New York now. Ingrid Jock says, guess what? They did. They left. There's a huge exodus taking place, said JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon recently. I mean, he has a vested interest being a Trump acolyte. And people just make a mistake. Oh, just tax those people. But that's the outcome. And boy, if you know something about billionaires, it's whatever they can do to avoid paying a tax, they're going to do to avoid paying a tax. They'll also complain about the crime and the educational, the crumbling infrastructure, all the things that the money they'd be paying taxes for would go to. But that's the outcome, he says. And very often people think they're being moral by doing that, but they're not. What they're doing is they're hurting your own city. And, unfortunately, people vote with their feet. New York is like the epicenter of capitalism, right? You look at that entire corridor of the country, the Northeast corridor, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. Let's throw that in there, too. We can even wedge in Providence, Rhode Island. We could talk about Richmond, Virginia. And these are all cities run by Democrats, right? There are also cities that have suffered since white flight, since scholastic integration, to combat the loss of economic activity and tax base, to maintain the infrastructure that they already had, let alone build on it, better it. And we've had this back and forth debating, I guess we'll call it. Sniping, I'll say. Left, right, suburban, urban. Even the word urban has a negative connotation to it. About taking care of our cities and for them to be those gleaming, shining cities on the hill Ronald Reagan opined about so eloquently, right? And we're letting them crumble. I live in Atlanta. Atlanta is the poster child for all that can go wrong after white flight and the need for a city to grow and to become an international destination, to be so important on so many levels. And yet Atlanta is, we say here colloquially, we full. We are. Our cities, our city streets are packed. And because the state won't do a damn thing to help, Atlanta's sort of stuck, literally stuck in traffic on the weekends during festivals or, I don't know, the FIFA World Cup coming, for example. Like, how are we supposed to accommodate that when we don't have a mass transit system representative of a city of this size, a metropolitan area of this size and population that, oh, by the way, has the largest and busiest airport on the planet attached to it? Make it make sense. Ingrid Jock wants to tell you that people are fleeing urban centers and progressive cities because of taxation, oppressive taxation, and because of culture issues, as Rahm Emanuel, got baited into and weaved into her op-ed. That's not why people are leaving progressive states and large cities. They're leaving because we have generations of our ancestors who made the mistake of not coming to terms with coexistence, just being able to get along with one another, to live side by side. For Johnny and Jamal to be able to go to the same school together. And we have put off and put off and put off civil rights policy and law and having adult conversations about getting along with one another. That is seen, and by the way, in the public school system as indoctrination. Even when you're having adults, rational adults who teach children that we all need to get along with one another. We need to mutually respect one another. Even if one of the 14-year-olds happens to be trans and needs to use the bathroom. That is why this great nation, the greatest nation on the planet, is sometimes the laughingstock when folks from other countries come to visit here. I retweeted, by the way, this video of a couple that came here from, was it London? I don't remember where they came from. And we're just walking through a subway stop, subway, what do you call it? A station in Philadelphia, and just grossed out by it. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Like you live outside of this country thinking, oh, America's the greatest country on the planet, and yet we don't have high-speed rail. Our high-speed rail goes about 80 miles an hour in that same Northeast corridor. You got trains in China going 200 miles an hour. France, they're going 130 miles an hour. Spain is well connected by train. We can't do that. We can't do that because we can't allow for the folks in the urban core to make it to the suburbs, the gated communities, because ick. That's it. That is why we are where we and for us to keep erecting issues to disagree about, for us to fight about. I mean, we're only contributing to the problem, to our nation's demise, to the decimation of what made America great. Well, for the folks that it was great for anyway, because we just want to keep it great for those that it's great for, and not for all Americans and those who wish to be Americans. The whole basis of the subway video that I shared at Ron Show ATL on Twitter X, if you're still there, I'm sorry. It is what it is. Maybe I'll find it on Blue Sky. Anyway, the whole premise being that we have been spending so much time, J.D. Vance, et cetera, and so on, going to Europe and finger wagging. Oh, you guys have turned Europe into a cesspool because you've allowed all these icky Muslims into your country and open border, blah, 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 blah. And these Europeans come to this country and they're like, our subways are cleaner than this, are nicer than this, more expansive. We can get anywhere in our countries by transit without having to hop in a car. But tell us more. Marginalizing minorities and withholding economic opportunity, that's not going to make any country greater. And so while I agree with Rahm Emanuel that that's what Democrats should be focusing on, Democrats also don't need to shrink every time some marginalized subset gets demonized by the right. And instead of worrying about filling out surveys as to how you would feel about this, just foster a cogent conversation on issues like trans participation in sports and stop the demonization in its tracks with that cogent conversation. That's how you win American voters. That's going to do it for The Ron Show. Thank you so much for listening. Weekdays 8 a.m., 4 p.m. on Georgia Now, 11 p.m. Progressive Voice via TuneIn or every podcast. Show notes as always at RonShowATL.com. Have yourselves a great weekend. Back on Monday for a full week of all of this instead of just a little bit here and there as I did this week. But I enjoyed the break. I'm not going to lie. See you next time.